Son of God there. Now, I want to switch topics here, and there's going to be two big things I want to cover in the book of Mark, and these are two big things. We've talked about a lot of personal background and Roman audience and things. And two of the things that come up big time in the book of Mark are this one, Jesus' self-designation. How does Jesus call himself? What does Jesus call himself? Jesus calls himself numerous times, as far as his own self-identification, Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. And so I just want to look through this and discuss then, what does Jesus mean by this term Son of Man? What does the term Son of Man mean? So first of all, we just want to talk about what does the term Son mean. What does son of a something or other mean? Son of man, what does son of mean? Well, sometimes it means if Jesus is the son of Joseph, what does that mean? If Solomon is the son of David, what does that mean? Okay, so in Jesus' case, Joseph wasn't his actual father, but he was a son of, kind of adopted into the family, kind of like a stepfather. And David and Solomon, Solomon the son of David, you're talking about actual sons. But then the term son can also mean not just son of immediate father-son relationship, but it also can jump 1,000 years. So you've got the son of David. So son of David would be 1,000 years. So you've got David being the father, Jesus Christ being the son of David, that's 1,000 years. Jesus Christ being the son of Abraham. Son of Abraham, that's another, like Abraham was about 2,000 BC. So you've got a 2,000-year jump there. So son of doesn't mean necessarily direct son of. Son of can mean 1,000 years, son of, that you're a progeny of, you're a descendant of. Doesn't necessarily have to mean direct son of there. Another thing we would say is spiritual son. Do you remember that Peter said that Mark was his son in 1 Peter 5:13? Timothy in 1 Corinthians 4:17, Timothy will be said to be Paul's son. Paul will call Timothy his son. And we know Paul was not the father of Timothy, but he's his spiritual father, that kind of a thing. So the term son of can mean a spiritual son of, it can mean literal son of, like first generation, but it can also jump down progeny. And then lastly, and probably most important for us, is we say son of can mean has the character of. Son of means has the character of. So when we say that James and John are the sons of thunder, what does that mean? That means that they have the character quality of being thunderous. And you remember James and John wanted to call down fire from heaven in the book of Luke. It describes James and John wanting to call down fire from heaven and things. And so they're sons of thunder. Barnabas, bar means son of, nabas means consolation. So Barnabas being son of encouragement or son of consolation, son of encouragement, son of, means that Barnabas is an encouraging type person kind of thing. So we even use that phrase today, son of a, and we say something usually in a negative context in my head, but son of a something or other. You're not saying that their parents had that, you're saying that this person has that quality. So son of man then would mean that he has the quality possibly of man. So we want to look at this and things, Jesus' self-identification, and it mentions explicitly, let me just do this at Caesarea Philippi in Matthew chapter 16, but also in Mark chapter 2 verse 10. Jesus comes to Caesarea Philippi. He asks his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Check that out. Who do people say the Son of Man is? They replied, now who is the Son of Man? Jesus. And he identifies himself as it. Who do people say the Son of Man is? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah. Still others, Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked, who do you say I am? Who do you say I am? The Son of Man? Who do people say the Son of Man is? Who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay, so Jesus identifies himself by that phrase. Now, I want to work through 5 nuances of this term Son of Man. Okay, there's going to be 5 nuances or 5 aspects to this, and I want to use this acrostic I-A-S-E-D. Okay, I-A-S-E-D. Okay? Okay, and the first one then, I think it identifies him with humankind. That is, he's a Son of Man. That is, Jesus is truly human. And so in Matthew chapter 8, verse 20, it says, the foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Okay? The foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man does not have anywhere to lay his head. In other words, what he's trying to say is the Son of Man is very human. And not only is he human, but he as a human being even doesn't have anywhere to lay his head. So it shows his identification with humankind, that he totally identifies with humankind and the lack of housing and things. Authority. Another aspect of this Son of Man thing is this notion of authority. Mark chapter 2 verse 10 says this, which is easier to say to the paralytic? Now, do you remember the story there? This guy is paralyzed. He can't walk. He's got 4 friends, apparently, or some, we don't know how many, but it was friends. His friends then pick him up on this cot. They can't get the cot into Jesus because the house is full of people. So what they do is they go up on the roof. Now you have to understand, this is not New England where your roofs are like this because you got so much snow going down. The roofs are flat. So they go up on the roof, and the flat roof, and it's made out of mud. Everything's like mud over there in terms of the housing and stuff. And they dig down through the roof. And I always wonder what Jesus was thinking as he's preaching, and these people are digging through the roof and all that mud and plaster and laughing. Well, it's plaster, anyways, mud coming down and on the thing. And then all of a sudden, boom, they drop this guy down on a mat, and with ropes or whatever, right down, boom, right into Jesus' lap. And Jesus then, everybody's expecting Jesus to say what? Get up and walk, man, I just healed you. What does Jesus say? Jesus doesn't do that. Which is easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk. But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. He said to the paralytic, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. And everybody was amazed. And they came at him saying, whoa, this guy said he could forgive sin? Who can forgive sin but God alone? And so this is a big factor here for the authority of Jesus, that Jesus has the ability to forgive sin, but Jesus also can heal the paralytic by speaking and get up, take your mat, and go home. And this guy does by the spoken word of Jesus. Okay? So the Son of Man has authority on earth to do these things. And so the term here with Son of Man is a position of authority. Now, this one is I think, very interesting. In the Old Testament, you have kind of 2 streams of thought in regard to the Messiah. You have what the Jews in old times called the Messiah ben David. Ben means son of. The Messiah, Mashiach, means the anointed one. The Messiah, the anointed one, ben David, the Messiah ben David. And this was the son of David from 2 Samuel 7, verse 14 and following, where God says to David, I'm going to make you, David, I'm going to make you a house, and the house is going to last forever. There's going to be one of your descendants, David, that's going to sit on the throne of Israel forever. And so they call that the Son of David. And so you get this Messiah coming, and the lion laying down with the lamb, and with him ruling with a rod of righteousness and justice, and peace and harmony coming to the earth. And you get all these wonderful predictions of the future of this coming Messiah that they're to look for. On the other hand, though, and this puzzled them, there's another aspect of the Messiah in the Old Testament that is a real negative one. And this is the suffering servant Messiah. You can see it in a stellar way in Isaiah 53. He shall be like a sheep who's taken to the slaughter, and by his stripes we are healed. By his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. God has turned everyone to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Isaiah 53. So some of the people said then there was a Messiah ben Joseph. You know how Joseph was put in prison? Joseph was sold as a slave into Egypt, and Joseph was thrown in prison. So they call that the Messiah ben Joseph, the son of Joseph, okay? The Messiah ben Joseph. The Son of Man term then in the book of Mark encompasses the notion of suffering. This Messiah, this Son of Man, has the notion of not the Messiah ben David, it's there, the coming king who's going to rule, but this Messiah ben Joseph, this suffering servant kind of thing. Now let me just read you a couple verses from Mark. These are wonderful verses. It says, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Get thee behind me, Satan, Jesus said to him. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. But it just says the Son of Man must suffer. And so you get this notion that Jesus is the Son of Man, that suffering is a part of that. Chapter 9, verse 31. So it goes 8:31, 9:31, and then kind of over 10:31, 3 in a row almost. But 9:31 it says, he's going to be killed. He said to them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. But they did not understand what he meant, and were afraid to ask him about it. Notice the disciples afraid to ask. We'll come back to that notion of fear later. And then chapter 10, verse 33, he will be betrayed. Okay? Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man, using again his self-identification as the Son of Man, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests, the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and hand him over. Okay? So basically talking about the betrayal that Judas would betray him, and the Gentiles who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. And 3 days later he'll rise from the dead. Good news. Okay? So the Son of Man has this notion in the book of Mark of this suffering servant. And that's a big theme in the book of Mark. Now, this one is a really tricky one, and one that you need to catch for sure. This is the eschatological Son of Man. The eschatological Son of Man. Now, when you say eschatological, what do you mean by that term eschatological? The term eschatological, eschaton, means the end. The end. So eschatology is the study of the end times. So the study of the end times, people that are into the book of Daniel and Revelation, it's kind of funny. In a church, you get, certain churches are into what? Romans and Galatians. Romans and Galatians. And everything's got to be understood by Paul's view of Christ in Romans and Galatians. And the rest of the Bible is understood through Romans and Galatians. And then they pride themselves in that kind of stuff. There's other folks that are more into the eschatological, and they understand the whole Bible in relationship to Daniel and Revelation. Daniel and the Revelation. And so you can look even at various schools, and various schools will emphasize Romans and Galatians, and other schools will emphasize Daniel and Revelation and things. And I think my point is that we need to understand the whole Bible through the whole Bible. I think it's actually the best to start with Genesis and actually read it the way it was written, rather than using, these a couple books to understand the whole rest of the Bible. But anyway, going back to this eschatological. So let's just check Jesus out here, and this is actually some incredible stuff here. Mark chapter 16, verses 61. This is at the end, Jesus. And the high priest asked him. So the high priest is condemning Jesus, going to condemn him to death and be crucified. He says, the high priest says, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus. Okay. Are you the Christ? Christ is Mashiach. Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed? I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man. See how he switches it? Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? That is the Son of the Blessed. Blessed is used in terms of God. Are you the Son of God? I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming in the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He says, you have heard his blasphemy. Now, how is this blasphemy? Well, it turns out that Jesus is quoting the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. You will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. Jesus is quoting from Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. And Daniel 7:13, you need to understand the Old Testament background. Who in the Old Testament rides the clouds? Who, comes on the clouds? Who rides the chariots of the clouds and stuff? Well, you say in the Old Testament it was Baal rides the clouds, but then you say no. The Old Testament corrects that in some places like Psalm 68, where it says Jehovah is the one who rides the clouds. God, Jehovah, Yahweh, the Lord is the one who rides the clouds. And now Jesus says you're going to see the Son of Man. Who does he call himself? The Son of Man. You're going to see the Son of Man come whooshing down on these clouds, man. And they say, and the priest then understood. A high priest understood exactly what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying that as the Son of Man in the book of Daniel was coming in the clouds of heaven for the final judgment there, that Jesus was saying, I am God. I am God. And therefore the high priest rips his clothes and says, this is blasphemy. Indeed, well, I wouldn't call it blasphemy because he was God. But Jesus then, you can see why he freaks out, because he's quoting this passage of the Son of Man passage is mentioned. The Son of Man, that title, is mentioned in Daniel chapter 3, verse 17, and it's referenced to God coming in on the clouds. And so that what you've heard is blasphemy. So it's just, it's beautiful how Jesus uses this term Son of Man to reference deity. And the high priest freaks then over this, okay? And then finally, this is our last point, and this is pretty much the same as this one. That is, the term Son of Man actually means, as reference to deity. And so you get this idea that the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven is actually a reference to deity. So the term Son of Man has many aspects to it. And it has basically identification with human beings, that he is totally human. He feels stuff. He doesn't have anywhere to put his head. He is authoritative. He heals people by his word. He forgives sins. He's the suffering servant. He's the Messiah ben Joseph. He suffers. He's going to kill. He's going to be betrayed. He's eschatological. He's coming in the clouds of heaven at the end of the world, going to make things right and stuff. The Son of Man is divine. And so these are the aspects then of this term Son of Man. It's a complex term. Jesus identifies himself by that term Son of Man. That's how he identifies himself. And so it's, I don't know, it's really kind of a neat term there, Son of Man.